Hello chess friends and welcome to the Art of Chess channel and welcome back to the TCEC Cup finals in 2021. We have reached now the semi-final stage, and in the semi-finals we have really two brutal match games. The first match game is of course the match game between Leela C0 and the top engine Dragon, and also in this other semi-finals we have a clash between Scorpion against Stockfish. So as I'm recording this video, this game, the match game between Leela C0 and the Dragon engine, is still going on. These two engines have played so far 21 draws, which is really wild. And also similar thing happened in the match game between Stockfish against Scorpion. Also these two engines have played the 21 draws in a row, and now we're in the game 22. So almost Stockfish got almost kicked out of the event, because if for instance Stockfish would have lost one single game, then Stockfish would be eliminated from this whole tournament. So Scorpion really deserves all of respect. The developers have created also a very powerful engine. The Scorpion engine played really great chess in the quarterfinal stage especially, so it was really a tough battle now between these two monsters, between Stockfish and Scorpion. So let's check out now the game 22. I think it was really incredible game, again with beautiful strategical and tactical elements in the Queen's Gambit declined in this positional line. So let's check out now the game. Again, pointing out the pre-arranged lines in this cup finals are really great, so the engines don't have to play dubious openings like the King's Gambit or something. They're playing the most popular and most often played openings now in top grandmaster level. For instance, they're playing many times the Queen's Gambit declined, Rui Lopez, really Italian games, really the normal openings that are also popular among masters now of these days. So let's check out now the game. C4, we have E6 by Scorpion. We have now d4, knight to f6, we have knight to c3. After move d5, the game basically transposed into the Queen's Gambit decline. We have now c takes d5. This was still pre-arranged, so it's now the exchange variation. After e takes d5, we have bishop to g5. This is now the so-called positional line. After move knight to d7, we have e3, and after bishop to e7, we have now bishop to d3. This move order, I'm recommending you. It's, I think, a powerful line that you can play as white, because what you're not doing is playing with your G knight. You're not playing the move knight to f3. We're waiting a little bit further, because what we want to do is to play knight to e2 and then to play f3 e4 to get a pawn central control. What we want to get is a central breakthrough with our pawn structure. So that's why delaying the knight's move is actually the main goal of this positional line of the exchange variation of the Queen's Gambit decline. So first we have played the Queen's Gambit decline, then after c takes d5 it became the exchange variation, then after this move bishop to g5 and delaying the knight move, it became the positional line. So that's why I love this line. I use it sometimes if I'm playing especially against much stronger player than I am. So I use this line in order to get at least some kind of a simplification in an early stage of the game. And the delaying idea, I think a great idea. As I said, main goal is here knight to e2 and then f3 e4. So here in the continuation c6, now comes this idea knight to e2. We have now h6, and that was the last pre-arranged move by the organizer. So it's now an equal game for both sides. As I said, in this cup events, the one engine doesn't have a huge advantage in an early stage of the game. The game basically is always set up in equal for equal chances for both sides. So here after move h6, we have bishop to h4, castling, and now castling also by Stockfish here. Here Scorpion plays now a simplification idea. Knight to e4 is simplifying the game, of course, further. The cool part about this knight to e4 jump is that you're getting more and more pieces traded off. So here Stockfish accepts the challenge, says, okay, I'm going to trade it off. Bishop to e7, we have queen to e7, and now Stockfish plays one of the most important positional elements that you have to know in these types of structures. Here it's very important to undermine the pressure by taking out the knight with the bishop. Taking out with the knight doesn't bring you so much, because after knight takes e4, here d takes e4, bishop to c4, it's not such a good move. This bishop can be kicked away with knight to b6. Knight to f6 is also an opportunity, and when the bishop is maybe kicked out, then king to h8, then an f5 f4 would be actually the main goal of black. So I think black is here really a good chance. Even I think black should be even probably slightly better, especially because of the space advantage that black has built here on the 4th rank. So black has an advantage in space. Black has already a pawn that has occupied its opponent's territory. So that's why here after move bishop to e4, a similar position is happening, but with a huge difference. this is now a static position, we have to say. f5, f4 will probably come in one particular game, but the problem is now when you play f5 and similar stuff, the bishop gets blocked out, so it's sort of a bad bishop idea here that white is playing. In the continuation of the game, we can also, I think, occupy here the c file, and the problem is now there is also clear target, which is now the weak square on c5. So the weak square c5 is actually the main strategical goal here. We have to, of course, defend our position here from white's perspective. It's really a positional battle because black will obviously attack the king side. So the main goal is, as I said, this knight outpost on c5, occupying here also the 5th rank maybe from white's perspective. So as I said, there are simple targets here for white, but you have to be careful because of this space advantage of blacks on the king side. So here h3, creating this blockade idea further against the light square bishop, because we have to, I think, say it, even if the black's bishop gets developed on e6, even if it gets maybe on d5, still this bishop can be always attacked by this knight. These knights are controlling the center very, very well, so it's not such a powerful bishop, this bishop on c8. So here knight to f6, we have queen to a4, we have rook to e8, and now rook from f to c1, and now bishop to d7. You see, you don't have actually so many good squares. Even if you try something like bishop to f5 here, it's not even better, because here knight to g3 is kicking away the bishop. You can maybe develop it here, but see it again, it's not such a improvement of the bishop's activity, because still it's a little bit blocked out by its own pawn. So that's actually the main positional goal, and I think white can proceed here with normal ideas: queen to b3, knight to a4, knight to c5, again trying maybe to occupy this weak square on the other side of the board. So here, after move rook from f to c1, we have bishop to d7. Here Scorpion is trying, of course, maybe a discovered attack by playing the move c5, but Stockfish is not scared of this position, plays simply a3, because even if you play c5, this wasn't played in the game, but it's actually not bringing so much. It's not such a dangerous idea, because we want actually black to play the move c5, because we can play now queen to c4, maybe something like rook to c8 can happen, and now knight to d5 is simplifying the game further and further. Maybe knight to d5, knight to d5, and even if you take, let's see, for instance, this possible continuation, then you get knight to d4, and that would be the actual goal of this strategy of creating the central pawn breakthroughs, because now the knight on d4 is really the best piece on the board. The knight cannot be kicked away anymore by any minor piece, because there are simply no other minor pieces on the board anymore. The bishop cannot kick away, of course, the knight, because the knight is on a dark square. So that's why creating this centralized knight would be a very, very powerful idea here for white. So that's why black should not touch anything in the center, because this knight will be of course very centralized, and then of course white has a huge advantage in the continuation of the game. So here in the continuation, after move let's see, after move a3, here in the continuation we have now b6 by this engine Scorpion, and we have now queen to b4, because here I think it's a cool idea by Stockfish to simplify the game by trading off the queens, because if after queen to b4, a takes b4, okay, in long terms, black will play f5, g5, h5, and similar stuff. Black will have his fun on the king side, but without the queens on the board, I think this attack of blacks to create maybe f5, f4 pawn breakers, g5, g4, and similar stuff is not so dangerous. With the queens on the board, then of course, if the queen gets somewhere on the king side with the support of the pawns, then black gets more attacking chances to win the game, I think. So that's why it was a pragmatic idea by Stockfish to play the move queen to b4. I think trades of queens wouldn't be good here for Scorpion. And then of course also the a file gets opened. Also what we can notice, the c file gets opened. So there are simple targets here for white. White would of course attack immediately the c6 weakness, but also the a7 weakness. So I think from this point on, white could have a comfortable game. So after move queen to b4, that's why queen to d8 by Scorpion. Scorpion is trying to stay with the queens on the board. Now it's finally trying f5, g5, and then maybe queen to g5 if it's possible. And then with the support of the bishop, this could be really a dangerous attack. So after move rook to c2 was played h5, we have queen to d6. Now Stockfish uses this moment in order to remaneuver the queen towards the king side, because I think it's now a very important moment in the game, because if you don't play this maneuver with the queen, then you get smashed immediately, I think, because you don't have so many great defensive pieces in front of the king. You have to bring more pieces into the defense. So that's why after move queen to d6 and h4, here rook from h to c c1 was played, of course targeting the weak c6 pawn. Here in the continuation we have now g5, and now comes this defensive idea by Stockfish. Great maneuver by the queen to h2, and now suddenly it looks like a good position here for Stockfish, because we can notice the rooks are on natural squares, we have a powerful battery, the knights are still centralized, the knights will find, I think, good ways in the continuation of the game to find new squares in this on the board. But now the most important thing is that the queen is here closer to the king, and we have now a great defensive piece. At least we can defend for a while. This pawn storm that we can expect, of course, in the near future, black will launch a flank attack for sure. So here after move queen to h2, king to g7, we have now knight to b1. Great move by Stockfish. Stockfish is now searching for new opportunities, especially Stockfish is targeting now a new weak square in the position, which is now the square e5. We have rook to e6, and now knight to d2. We have knight to d5, knight to c4, and now f6. You see, Scorpion is preventing this idea, saying, no, you're not going to jump on this square. This square is taken. You can never really be there. So here in the continuation, we have now knight to c3. And again, what Stockfish is hoping for is maybe this scenario, maybe something like after rook to c8, to simply trade off here the knight for a knight, and then after something like, I don't know, c takes d5. This pawn structure is of course not so good when you understand that you have your light square bishop on the board, so that's why bringing more pieces on light squares wouldn't be a good idea here for black. So that's why here after move knight to c3, okay, Scorpion says, I want to stay with my knights on the board, I don't want to simplify things, I want to launch this flank attack with f5, f4, I want to bring more pieces in the attack. If the game goes into an endgame, then of course white is much better, especially because of this activity by the rooks on the c file. So here we have knight to d2, we have a bishop to e8, and now king to h1. Here knight from c to e4 wouldn't be so good. It seems like a good idea to take the pawn, but then bishop to g6 is pinning the knight, and you're now facing many positional problems. The same thing happens even if you play knight from d to e4, bishop to g6. You can maybe protect it for a while, but now with knight to f5, I think here from this point on black is a comfortable game. First of all, we can notice the e3 is a weakness. Now there's still this tension, the queen will come into the game, so even c5 as a long-term plan could be a possibility to open somehow here the d file. So as I said, from this point on, I think black at least equalize the game, although black is down the whole pawn. But my Stockfish engine at home still gives here slightly edge for white, but simply the evaluation is not so much better than before this line. So as I said, this wouldn't be maybe the best continuation here for white. So after move knight to f5, I think black has at least equal chances here. So king to h1 was played, so Stockfish doesn't take here the pawn on e4. We have king to h6, queen to g1, we have now f5, and now b4. If you play bishop to g6, here bishop to h5 was played by this engine Scorpion. Even if you play bishop to g6, maybe to try this move f4, I've calculated at home. I was very curious what's going to happen if black manages to push the pawn on f4. Then here I think a4 is a possibility, and even if you play f4, we can play now knight to c4. Here from white's perspective, we can target, of course, the weak d4 square, the weak e5 square. That was our goal in the beginning, so that's why after move knight to c4, maybe knight to f5 could happen, also attacking the e3. But now after knight to e5 takes, and here even if black maybe gets this knight on g3, nothing dramatically changed. Here I've also calculated this tactic, if it's working. It's not working because after d takes e5, here queen to e7, we can play knight to e2, maybe queen to e5 takes, and nothing dramatically changed because here white has solved all of the positional problems. Now this pawn is hanging, and in the continuation we can simply trade off the queens, and this is game over for black. So this was my analysis at home. I was very curious what would happen if black plays now the move bishop to g6 with the support, then try maybe to play an early f4. So far the f4 pawn breakthrough is simply not a good idea here for black. So after move bishop to h5, that was black's continuation. Here a4 played by Stockfish. We have queen to g8, queen to h2, we have rook to f8. You see black is maneuvering all of the pieces towards the king side, where of course black has a huge space advantage. Black is trying now to break through simply. So here I've removed rook to f8, b5, knight to g6, and here Stockfish simply takes. Even if you take here c takes b5 from black's perspective, then knight to b5 happens, and then if you try to finally play this f4 move, then you get this one, knight to c7, and you have to step back here from the defense of the e4 pawn. So here after move b5, as said, we have knight to g6. Here b takes c6 was played by Stockfish, rook to c6, and now finally d5. Stockfish created here a very annoying pass pawn, which now black has problems to solve. I think now the d5 move creates new opportunities for white, because suddenly all of black's pieces are a little bit stuck and they're aiming simply towards the center of the board, not anymore towards the king side, because you have to really take care of this pawn. So that's why rook to c8, you see a passive move here by Scorpion. We have knight to b3, we have f4, and now knight to d4. Again, Stockfish found great ways how to maneuver the pieces. Stockfish is not touching anything here. Stockfish waits now the pawn storm to come. When that happens, of course, then it's time to create new defensive ideas. So here after move knight to d4, we have king to h8, knight to e6. Very cool maneuver by the knight. You see Stockfish gets closer and closer with this knight. Rook to f5, knight to d4, and now rook to e5. We have queen to g1, rook to c5, and now knight to e6, creating a new attack against the rook. Rook to c4, we have knight to d4, and here queen to f8, knight to c6. Now Stockfish found a great way how to trap even one of these rooks, but actually the game becomes now really wild and tactical. Most of these lines are pretty much forced, so all of this next couple of moves are really forced by even by my Stockfish engine at home. So it's now really brutal tactical sequence, because after rook to f5, again a new attack. Here Stockfish didn't know basically what to do in the beginning, but here after queen to f1, now the rook gets attacked, and there is not a good square here for black. Black has to play now the move rook to c5. Now again Stockfish is attacking this other rook. After move rook to e5, now knight to e6 creates this fork, but actually this knight to e6 creates now also great opportunities for black, because here Scorpion accepts the challenge. We have rook to e6, we have of course d takes e6, but now queen to c8, now creating this very annoying battery on the c file, because the knight is also a little bit stuck here. So here e takes f4, knight to f4, we have e7, and now a very cool move also by Scorpion. We have now knight to d3, but the problem is now again Stockfish calculated everything pretty well. So here maybe it's time for you to stop the video a little bit and pause the video and try to see now the best continuation here for white. Maybe it's really hard to see, but it's really brilliant move, a great defensive move that Stockfish found here in the beginning. It's really hard to see, but I want you really to maybe take your time and try to solve this very annoying chess puzzle, because some of these things can happen to you. Maybe you can play a middle game where you have a situation where you have maybe the rook for a bishop, where you simply up the exchange, but then suddenly you don't know what to do. I'm telling you this because many of these things happened to me when I played some chess games, especially in classical time format games. Even in classical time format games, sometimes I didn't find simply the best continuation. So I think it's something here worth the study. Try to see now the best continuation here for white, because it's really a brilliant move. Okay, here Stockfish found the move f3, because if you take, of course, here with e takes f3, then of course the knight will be taken, and after f takes g2 we can simply play king to g1. The problem is now also this pawn is covered by the queen, so the queen cannot get into the game, and still of course black has to take care of also of this pass pawn on the e file. So here after move f3 in the continuation of the game, here this engine, the Scorpion, played now knight to c1, but now comes the cool part of this tactic. Stockfish didn't take this knight immediately, played now f takes e4. That was part of Stockfish calculation. Now the serious goal is of course to create here this check queen to f8, and then also maybe as a long-term plan to deliver here the queen to simply promote a new queen on the e file. So after f takes e4, everything is, as I said, pretty much forced. Queen to e6, here the Scorpion is trying to attack this very annoying pawn. Even if you try here something like knight to b3, let's see now this possible continuation. If you try maybe to get back with your knight, if you try to stay maybe with your knight on the board. Then you get queen to f8, king to h7, and then you get, pardon me, sorry, I played it a little bit too fast. So after move knight to b3, here you have the opportunity to play queen to f8, and then after king to h7, knight to d5. Knight to d5 is a serious threat with preparations to play knight to f6, which would be actually checkmate. So you would be forced to play here something like queen to c6. The problem is now, of course, if you take this one, then we simply take, and then of course it's simply checkmate here also, probably on the 8th rank. So that's why here we would be forced to play queen to c6 in order to cover this f6 square. But here we can take, of course, rook to c5, knight to c5, now knight to f6. Here you have to sacrifice the queen, queen to f6, and then after queen to f6 it's simply game over. So after f takes e4, that's why here in the continuation of the game queen to e6 was played. So as I said, knight to b3 is not working, you cannot escape with your knight. So queen to f8, first the check, we have king to h7, and now rook to f2. Brilliant move again here by Stockfish. Stockfish leaves also this knight unprotected. Here the knight on c3 is hanging, but the problem is now after rook to c3 we have now a rook to f6 with preparations to play, of course, rook to h6, a brilliant checkmate. So that's why here in the continuation rook to h3 was played. If you try g takes h3, it's not so good. Queen to h3 leads now into checkmate for black, so that's why you cannot do that. After move rook to h3, here Stockfish found, of course, the best move, king to g1, escaping with the king. Again, here the Scorpion engine has a new check, but it's not the problem. The cool part is that Scorpion doesn't have perpetuals. And here in the continuation queen to f6, we have queen takes f6, and now rook to g3, bringing the rook into defense. Now we have queen to f5, king to g7, now a new check, and here after queen to c7, king to h6, queen to c4, we have knight to c3, and again a new check. After king to g7, queen to e5, king to h7, and finally Stockfish promoted a new piece. Here it was a little bit funny that actually Stockfish promoted here to a rook. After move e8, the promotion, we have a bishop to e8, queen to e8, and it seems so that maybe this could be a draw for black, but actually it's not so, because the king is a little bit too naked. The black's king is always vulnerable to the attack by white's queen, so that's why here after move knight to d1, we have king to e2, we have knight to e3, and now Stockfish simply pushed upon further e5, knight to f5, queen to h5, first a check, king to g8, queen to g6. We have here a cover with the move knight to g7, but now after king to f2, the rook has to go somewhere. But the problem is now the rook is simply too far away from the action. Now it gives time for Stockfish here to push this extra pawn on the e file. We have now rook to f4, king to g1, rook to f8, e7, you have to block, rook to e8, and now queen to f6, g4, we have king to h2. And the problem is now that actually black is in sort of a Zugzwang position. The problem is now if you move the rook somewhere, then you lose probably some pawns here. If you move the knight, then the problem is here a check, and you lose also here the rook. So if you play with your king somewhere, then you have also this idea with queen to f8. So these are the problems of this position. So all of these three pieces, the knight, the king, and the rook, are a little bit stuck. They have to stay like this, and the queen is simply holding all of them. So here after we move queen to h2, we have h3, g takes h3, g takes, king takes, and now knight to h5, attacking the queen. Queen to e6, king to g7, king to g4. Now the king is marching towards the center. Even if you try something else, you see, even if you try here knight to f6, it's not even better, because here the king can come into the attack. You have to move your knight back, and then with queen to g6, you have only one square. Now with queen to e8, the game is again simply over. So here after move queen to e6, as said, king to g4, the knight has to move here to g3, but now king to g3 is simply winning the game. Here king to g5, after rook to e7 and queen to e7 in this position. Scorpion resigned. So brilliant game, and with this game Stockfish won the semifinals against Scorpion with only one win and 21 draws, which was really wild. Congratulations also to the developers of the Scorpion engine, because that's exactly what we wanted to see. Really great games in natural healthy openings. I think, as I said, for instance, this Queen's Gambit declined, this calm lines are very popular in top grandmaster level, and I think we can see the most important strategical elements of this opening. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more strategical brilliancies and tactical brilliancies like this, check out my commented chess games, the best chess games by engines. Here's the link of our series. And if you want to see humans battling it out in their best chess games, check out my best chess games of all time series with some great games from the past. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.